All right, hello everybody and welcome back to the Shakedown, a long-awaited video I haven't recorded in so long because, as a lot of you know, I am in grad school for school counseling and to become a licensed practicing counselor. But I am done with my semester. I have some downtime, and so I really wanted to get back to making a little bit of content. So I asked my friend Anais if she wanted to come on my channel. Let's just have a conversation. So it's like an interview, but we're just going to have a conversation. So I'd like to introduce you to my friend Anais, who you may know on Instagram as Maiden Mother Cronatia. So welcome, Anais.
Maiden Mother Crone. Sorry, it's Maiden Mother Crone.
Why did I say Cronatia? Where did that come from?
Because I have the CA at the end because it's Canadian, because I'm Canadian. So I think that's where the confusion comes from. That's okay.
Well, leave it to a blonde American to screw up a pronunciation of something, because that is so typical of us. That is a very American thing to do. Wow. Okay, so how do I want to start this? So let's talk about, okay, give everybody your background first, and then we can talk about how we came to be friends and how we met. So tell everybody about you.
Okay. So my name is Anais. I am Canadian. Oh God, where to start? Okay, I'll start with my education, I guess. I have a degree in gender and women's studies, a degree in creative writing, and I'm currently finishing up my master's in teaching, in primary teaching. So I'm currently writing my thesis on, technically it's capstone, and I'm redesigning the primary curriculum to support a more inquiry-based, play-based pedagogy. So there's a lot of research behind that. I might talk about that at another time on my own page, but that's what I'm doing right now. And then hopefully by the end of the year, I will have graduated. I'll apply to OCT and I will get my own classroom by next year, but we'll see.
So what's OCT?
OCT, sorry. OCT. So in Canada, I think it's pretty similar to the States. Our education system is by province. So I think yours is by state as well, right? Yeah. So ours is by province. So I'm in Ontario. So OCT is the Ontario College of Teachers. Okay. And they basically license you. So once you've graduated, once you have the sort of proper qualifications, they will license you. And then there's also, if I ever refer to OFT, that's the Ontario Federation of Teachers. I think, to be honest, I don't know the difference, but the Ontario Federation of Teachers has more to do with elementary, so I think they might just be the one that deals with the younger grades.
Primary, what grades are primary in Canada?
Primary are 1 to 3. So
1 to 3. Okay, so you'll just be certified in 1 through 3. Okay.
No, I will be certified in primary junior. So I'll be certified for kind of K till 6. Although to teach kindergarten, I do have to do an additional qualifying course, which is it's a very short course.
So in Canada, to be a teacher, you need to have a master's?
No. So that's something that I'm you need to have a B.Ed.
Okay.
Or an equivalent degree, an equivalent qualifying degree. So that can be I already have 2 BAs. So sorry, I already have a BA and a minor. So I don't need to do a B.Ed because I don't need to do all those extra courses. So I'm just sort of getting my qualifying course as a master's.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I mean, we have that also here, but I wasn't sure. I thought maybe it sounded like
no, you don't need. Okay. You don't need a master's, although it does sort of bump you up a pay grade.
Well, here too. Yeah. I mean, getting your master's, but it's honestly, over time, it's significant, but that initial pay bump is here's $3,000.
My choice was really just because I already had an undergrad.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So how do we want to tell the story of how we met?
Okay, I'm it's been long enough that I'm fully willing to be open about. So over the pandemic, I don't know how I got involved with the anti-MLM community. Honestly, I was just like, so, okay, I think part of the reason is that, like, because of my background in gender and women's studies, and feminism, as well as my interest in politics, specifically, the the dissolution of capitalism, I got really interested in the way that, like, multi-level marketing specifically targets women, and specifically targets a very specific type of women, in my opinion. Not type of women in terms of personality, but in terms of where they are in their life. And it's usually someone who either did work outside the home, but is now sort of more geared towards their children and is really missing that sort of feeling like they're contributing to the household. Or
they call it a type of vulnerability.
Yes. Yeah. So, and a lot of feelings of, money is tight and I feel I need to contribute in a way that I haven't been or can't in another form. So, it's they're not targeting, women who are fully self-sufficient in terms of finances. Everything is fine. They don't have any bills that are outstanding. They don't have, they're not targeting rich women. Really, like the rich women that are in it know exactly what they're in, and that's why they're at the top. But so I got really interested in that, and sort of, especially because I was looking into the rise of multi-level marketing style companies with the entering of women in the workforce in like the 60s kind of. So I was looking at like Avon and stuff like that, and sort of, and then again, that led me to sort of this idea of like having it all, and that idea that is very pushed on women about, you can have it all. No one's asking that of men. No one's saying to men, you can be a stay-at-home father and be constantly there for your children and, be the primary caregiver for your children, and you can be CEO. Like, no one's asking that of men, but we're asking that of women. So I got really interested in that, and I fell into the anti-MLM community, and I created a page called Hermit Honey, and that is no longer in. I'm no longer doing that anymore, mainly because I realized that the anti-MLM community was the exact same as the MLM community. So,
and I want to restructure that, because I agree with you. I agree with you from where you're coming from, but I want to restructure that statement just because the anti-MLM community is the same as the MLM community when it comes to Instagram, social media, and the type of content that we were specifically reacting to.
Yes. So let me explain a lot of that statement.
Who are very, so let's
let me explain that
down. Yeah.
When I talk about the MLM community, I'm talking about the popular culture of community. I'm not talking about, like, we're not talking about individual people who are actually doing the work to, get the government to change their position. There are multiple creators on here who I can't think of at the moment, but, I know there are multiple who have sort of done actual work to sort of, get people to write in, get people to, be writing to the government and stuff like that. And that's amazing. Yeah. When I talk about the anti-MLM community, I'm talking about the sort of pop culture community of that, and the community that is built not on change, but is unfortunately built on shame. In my opinion, the community, I understand where it started from, and I understand what the initial goals were and what some people in the community are still working towards. But ultimately, on Instagram, on social media, within the sort of community, a huge problem is that people aren't actually working to end anything. They're simply working to shame other people. And it's great to call out bad behavior. It really is. But I took an anti-discrimination course this summer, and, a lot of it was about sort of ways to sort of call in people and ask them to think about, their positions and think about their actions, think about what they're saying and what sort of the implications of that is. And I think that the anti-MLM community, unfortunately, is really big on calling out and not so big on calling in. And when you call people out, it's an attack, it's aggressive, it immediately ends conversation. Nobody wants to have a conversation when they're being attacked. When you call people in, you're saying, let's look at that statement. Like, what does that mean? You know, well, what if this? You're sort of applying the Socratic method in that you're asking them questions about that statement and asking them to sort of explore that statement deeper so that hopefully they can come to their own conclusions. You know, I see a lot of anti-MLM creators specifically employing the exact same language and behaviors that they call out in some of the big MLM girls. You know, I really hate the whole attacking people for their looks, you know, that kind of thing, especially when, you know, let's be honest, you can't call people out for having injectables when you have injectables. Like, that's a very hypocritical thing to do. And there's nothing wrong with having injectables. There really isn't. Like, if that's what you want to do, that makes you feel good about yourself, no problem with it at all. It's your body, your choice. What you can't do is shame other people for doing something with their body. And I believe that even if you don't have injectables, like, it's, I don't have anything done. I would never shame someone for doing it.
Right.
You know, because it's their body. But you hear a lot of that, or you hear a lot of like, oh, well, you know, they're fake, they're, you know, this, and this. And it's like, well, does that actually have anything to do with the predatory, and even like, bring it all back. All that matters is the predatory business model. I don't care, you know, these women are, some of these creators in the MLM community are toxic in other ways. That's not what you should be focused on. Is changing the law. That's what's going to change things. We can, you know, you can yell at people about what their behavior is like till they're blue in the face. And honestly, these women in these MLMs, they know who these people are. They've seen their pages. Like, they know the rhetoric, and they're not changing their mind, and they won't. So what we need to work towards is making it so that they can't take advantage of people.
Well, I think and I think the bigger problem too with it that I was starting to realize as I was growing, and then, you know, obviously everything imploded, but is when you become a full-time YouTuber and the content that makes you the most views to then make your money is this type of content, then you're going to keep doing it because now it's your income. So whether the people who do that or not want to fully admit that maybe it is problematic, they will also fully admit, this is my full-time income. I have to protect myself and yada, yada, which I agree and support that you need to protect yourself. But I mean, I think that my channel is a really great, hi puppy. I think that my channel is a really great example of, like, I was getting great views. I was getting thousands of views when I was making that type of content, when I was reacting to the Huns, when I was calling the Huns out, when I was being, you know, savage and whatever. And I was getting tons of views when I was reacting to the drama, and then once I stopped doing that, my views tanked, because that's not what the Chaos Machine, which is a great book by Max Fisher, if you've not read it, but I'm going to keep calling it that. The Chaos Machine, that's what it perpetuates. And so people who now are making a living off of it, I don't want to say it's not an honest living, but it puts them into a hole where even if they want to create other content or something different, they can't, because now their income is based off of them doing exactly what they are doing. So it's hard for them to change. So I think that that's the bigger issue.
Especially because social media is so tied to an algorithm. So if you establish yourself in a certain realm, you have to keep making content in that realm to continue to get your views, right? It's very hard to switch niches, right? And I think the other interesting part about that is that ADHD brain, just forgot, completely forgot.
All day, every day.
It'll come back to me, but
Well, so let's shift for a second. So while your ADHD brain's trying to find it, so going back to how we met, so I knew you as Hermit Honey, and we had like a pretty good rapport going back and forth of like,
and I think I told you pretty early on like who I was.
I think
like, trusted you.
Yeah, it wasn't too early on, but it was early on enough that when things really started to blow up for me, and I was part of the, you know, the whatever, and you were a huge support for me. My showing support for you then became an even bigger issue because you were the villain almost. Because the thing that I've always really respected about you, and it's not even just that, I don't want to use the word loose cannon because I don't think loose cannon is the right word, but you are unapologetically going to say what you're thinking. But the beauty behind what you say is that you have such an education and you come with the knowledge and the fact. So when it comes to things like misogyny, when it comes to things like transphobia, homophobia, you're not just saying you're transphobic, you are presenting the reasoning. Here is what you did, and here is the facts and the studies and the statistics and the education and the knowledge that I have to back up my accusation. And I think that is so threatening to a lot of people. And so when I recognized that in you, I was like, this is who I want to be friends with. I'm going to align myself with someone else who, even because you and I are similar in that we're polarizing. You don't give a shit. You will say, you don't care who you make mad. And I'm similar in that way, and I will fully admit I think you are so much more even educated than me because you are I don't know, you have a degree in women's studies. So like you already have that like background, knowledge, like you have that background. So it's probably easier for you to just like regurgitate what the stuff you need to regurgitate in those moments. So when I aligned myself with you, which is what I was doing, it really made people angry. And I would much rather align myself with someone with your education and know-how than people who are just going to reshare crap on the internet without really knowing the basis of it, right? So that's kind of how, and so then when you closed that account, I was still following your main account now, Maiden Mother Crone. Carnation, I don't know why I said that. Maiden Mother Crone. And honestly, I think that the beautiful thing about you two is that you are confusing, especially to men. I think that when men come at you, because you recently shut down your TikTok because the men were on your case. Yeah. They see you like it's no big secret that you are a beautiful woman. I think with or without makeup, to me, I've always associated, when I first saw your face, I was like, oh my God, she's like an Angelina Jolie with just like this great structure. And like with or without makeup, I think that you're just stunning, like just the way that your face is structured. And I think that men see that and be like, oh, here's a beautiful girl who's not going to know. And then you open your mouth and you're like, knowledge and things that will shut you down. And they're like, they don't know how to handle it. And I think that's what's the best. And so then I followed your account and you're like modeling and you've got all these amazing shots and just you completely defy what people are going to expect when they see you because you present such education as well. And I think it's you were a great example of not judging a book by its cover, not looking at a beautiful woman and assuming she won't be educated, or not looking at a less conventionally beautiful person and assuming, well, she's probably really smart or has a great personality. You know what I mean? You do that all the time. So that's why I really just love your account, because you're just unapologetically yourself. And I just think you're just great. I just really adore you.
Thank you. That's honestly probably the best compliment I've ever received. It has taken me a long time to, the thing with me is that I think I've kind of always been unapologetically me, but no, that's not true. I've always been me, but I've been very apologetic of it in the past. Part of the problem with being an opinionated female is that people don't want that of you. And the people that do want it, for example, a lot of the men that I date, they love that I'm opinionated until I'm opinionated with them. They love that they can bring me to events and I can hold my own. I can, have a conversation. I can, talk about whatever we're talking about, blah, blah, blah. They don't love when I have an opinion to them and it may be different. Yeah, it might be different than theirs, or like they don't necessarily like that, or the other thing that comes with being an opinionated woman is telling my opinion, telling you how I feel. I don't like when you do that. Don't do that, Right. And I think that, or like, that's really toxic. That, like, why did you say that? That can be really intense to a lot of people. And it took me a very long time to realize that that wasn't my fault. That wasn't something I needed to change. That was just, I needed to find people who weren't afraid of that.
Right.
So, yeah. And I think that, you know, unfortunately, this is weird to talk about, because the minute you sort of acknowledge that you're conventionally attractive or that you think that you're pretty, people are like, oh my God, you're so full of yourself. And I'm like, okay, literally since the day I was born, people have been telling me that. That's the first thing anyone says to me when they meet me. It's the first thing anyone says to my parents. It's like, it's the first thing anyone notices and anyone talks about. It's to the point where I don't hear it. I kind of just go like, oh, okay, it makes me embarrassed. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, whether or not I'm pretty isn't even the question. It's that people have told me that. Even if they're lying to me my whole life, people have told me that my whole life. So that becomes what I expect of myself. And that puts a lot of pressure on me. Jose! It becomes this weird sort of like standard then that I set for myself, where I'm like, okay, well, everyone expects me to be, you know, the prettiest person there, so I need to be the prettiest person there. And it means that I spend so much time and money trying to look a certain way. And the funny thing is that I ended up realizing I already looked like I'm already a white, you know, relatively thin, you know, good skin, don't really have any, you know, teeth problems, whatever. Like I sort of have the trappings of a conventionally attractive person, everything that like people are asking for. So why am I spending all this time and money to look like something I already look like? You know, like I'm already a white girl, you know, like I'm already a pretty white girl. So that's what, you know, society is asking of me. And obviously that's not to say that like people who are not white are not pretty. That's just, you know, we're talking about like society.
Right. Society. Right. So just to be perfectly clear.
Yes. Just to be very perfectly clear, like the Eurocentric beauty standards that our society sort of expects.
Right. Because thinness was based around whiteness, right? Like that was one of the things when I've done all this reading about anti-diet stuff, like when we were ingrained to be thin, it did not take into account all of the other ethnicities that just physically can't even be the thinness that white society perpetuates. So and
it's interesting. It's not only that, it's also that thinness is a decidedly colonial idea.
Right.
A lot of other cultures do not celebrate thinness. In fact, in most other cultures, thinness, like it used to be in Western society, like in medieval times and stuff, and way back when, you know, thinness is indicative of unhealthiness, of you know, poverty. Like only the poor, you know, farmers are thin, right? If you're nice and plump and, you know, pink cheeked and, you know, then you clearly have money and wealth and are healthy, right? Obviously that's not necessarily true, but those were the sort of like ideals of that time. And those are the ideals of a lot of other cultures. But, you know, Western culture, and not even all of Western culture, just sort of Hollywood Western culture has sort of clung to this thinness. And obviously that has to do with capitalism in so many ways. But so it's anyways. So I was just going to say that I learned very early on that I had to come with facts, because if I didn't come with statistics and data, nobody believed me.
Right.
Or like took me seriously.
Yeah, I think, and that's, so what you brought up a little bit ago, and I think was what we wanted to talk about, was like this idea too, and like we're going to kind of bounce a little bit around, but we were talking about the idea of women having it all, right? Because we were talking about MLMs and, you know, so in your definition, how would you describe the ideal having it all lifestyle as portrayed by, you know, American, I mean, I know you're not American, but American capitalism is what I'm going to refer to it as. I mean, and honestly, also sidebar, you know way more about America than I swear. And like, it is, when you post things about America, I'm like, hold up. And I go, look, I'm like, she's absolutely right. I'm like, how do I not know this stuff? Like, you know more. People who don't live in America know way more about America and our
100%
than we actually do. It is
100%.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. Yeah. It's a problem. It's bad.
That is like there are quantifiable studies that prove that. Yeah, it's wild. Yeah. In fact, I will be honest, I probably know more about American politics than I do about Canadian politics.
Yep, that's because it's like, I don't know.
Just
I mean,
it's also partly because the media
is about Canadian politics, but like it just seems like America. I don't know. America just sucks so bad.
America runs the media. America runs the media. That's what we're constantly confronted with. Like in you know, and even unfortunately, even you know, world like in other countries, like it's not just Canada and the U.S. Like I know they get a lot of American news and stuff in England, and like a lot of places just know so much about America, and it's like why? It's not that important. Why? It's very small, and who cares? I mean, it's not. It's bigger than some countries. But, okay, so. What I was going to say was in 1982, a woman named Helen Gurley Brown wrote this fucking book called Having It All, Love, Success, Sex, Money, even if you're starting with nothing. So she was considered, you know, one of the most successful women in America at the time. Just to sort of paint a picture of the time we're talking about, you know, we're talking about just post sort of second wave, maybe third wave, I don't know, feminism, where women, you know, gained the majority of their rights outside the house, in the workplace, family planning rights, like all of this stuff sort of geared towards allowing women to be independent, because prior to that, you know, there, first of all, birth control came on the market relatively recently in that time. I mean, it was, I think it was in the 60s, birth control came on the market, maybe a little before that, but it wasn't sort of a wide sort of, now it's like everyone uses it, right? But it wasn't sort of widespread, and there were a lot of you know, trials and unfortunate things going on, and side effects and stuff. But like birth control, when birth control became a thing, that's when the feminist movement really sort of got to take off, because now all of a sudden women didn't have to get pregnant. We could choose not to, and then we could hold jobs. Because the problem is that, I mean, another problem was that women, we didn't really gain this during this time, but it was something we started talking about, was that when you take maternity leave in a job, you're taking, you know, however much time you take off, you're setting yourself that much behind. You know, you don't necessarily get to come back to the same position. You've missed a bunch of projects. You've missed a bunch of this. You missed a bunch of that, right? And women didn't want to have to do that, especially when they were climbing the career ladder that they really wanted to climb, especially because there is absolutely no male equivalent. So, you know, you had, that was sort of the background of it, right? Women were finally able to hold careers. 10 years later, in the 80s, so that was sort of in the 70s, 60s and 70s, so that was the big movement. In the 80s, you have a bunch of these career women who have almost made their money not off of their actual careers, but off of talking about how successful they are in their careers. What does that sound like to you? Kind of like coaches to me. But so this woman, Helen Brown, she wrote this book. Basically, she was the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan magazine, and she wrote this, you know, which is great, right? So she basically made her living writing articles telling women they're not good enough. But she then wrote this book that essentially perpetuated this idea that was already, it named this idea that was already in the consciousness of everyone, that now women could and should have it all. So prior to this, the expectation, women could work, that's fine. But the expectation was that you work until you have a family, right? And the family is, you know, what a woman does. Now women are in the workplace, but we really still need women to be having families and taking care of families, because if they're not, who does it, right? So there's this huge movement now that women are working, to force them to believe that they have to do both. We're not going to say, okay, you can't work, because that didn't work. You know, like we did that for a long time, and now you want to work. Fine, you can work, but you still have to do your womanly duties. You don't get to give up being a woman, you know, by their standards. simply because you want to work. So now you have to do it all. And guess what? You should, right? This idea that you have to be full-time mom, take care of the kids, always have a hot dinner on the table, always keep the house, ready for company, right? This idea that you have to be this fantastic, energy bunny lover with, absolutely no boundaries and ready to go in the moment, this idea that you also have to be a high-powered career woman who, takes her shit and works really, really hard and, is at the top of her career. And you have to be nice about it.
Right.
That's not possible. That's just not possible. There are 24 hours in a day and you cannot be in two places at once. Like, that's impossible.
Right. And you cannot be more than one person at one time.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the wild part, is because then they also started expecting the softness of women at home with the hardness of men in the office. But that's not acceptable because a woman who's a leader is a bitch. So you have to somehow figure out how to lead a team of people that doesn't respect you because of your gender and be nice about it.
Right.
You can bake cookies that say "fuck you." I don't know, but like,
I think it's just what's really frustrating about it is I don't know, and maybe I just don't have the foresight to like really see into the future. Obviously, I'm not a fortune teller, but like, I don't know that I can see what the solution's going to be. Like,
to that idea,
to just the idea that like. That we will eventually live in a world where women can have the children. Obviously, we have to. And take the time off to fully recover and be where we need to be and do what we need to do and not feel like we're behind on our career and not feel like we're being a bitch if we're being assertive I just don't know at what point. I don't know when I see that ever happening.
I hear you. All I'm going to say is that I bet the suffragettes never saw a day where women would be allowed to run for office. But here we are. There was a time when spousal rape was legal. In fact, I believe in some places in the States that was up until the 90s. There were times when women couldn't have bank accounts. There were times when women couldn't, own property. There, like all of this, and all of that stuff has happened in the last 100 years. That's it.
Right. And I don't want to say like this to be like the Debbie Downer of like, there's no.
I totally get it. Like, and especially when you can't see, like, there's no clear path. There's no well, you take these steps and then it happens. Like, it's not a recipe. What it is.
Part of my concern though is that like, the suffragettes didn't have the internet to contend with. They didn't have.
They also didn't have it to work with.
They didn't have what?
Have it to work with. Like, just the flip side of that is.
That's true. Yeah. I don't know. I get frustrated when I think about how there are so many men who are so vocal on these platforms that really push back against us. Yeah. And it's like every time, like speaking for myself in the States, like every time I think that maybe there's going to be some hope for paid maternity leave where we don't have to, like I always hate saying this out loud, but like, obviously the pandemic was awful, but because of the pandemic, I did not end up having to even technically take maternity leave. So I didn't have to financially worry about my money because I was still getting paid because I was still working from home.
Right.
So like the fact that I was going into a maternity leave, like worried about my money, and then this horrific thing happened in the country. Well, okay, now I don't have to worry about my
That was like a silver lining, right?
Right. It was like a weird silver lining too. Yep. It's like, I don't want to be grateful for the pandemic. Like, no, but it's like,
I totally get that.
Yeah. So it's really frustrating. And I have, as far as maternity leave is concerned, I just have very low hope on that front, at least in America, that there will ever be a day, because I'm done having kids. So like there's no, I'm not holding out hope for me.
You're never going to benefit from it. Yeah.
Right. But for my daughter, if she chooses to have children, I hope that when she has children in 25, 30 years, she doesn't have to have the same worries that I did, because that makes me sick to think about.
Quite frankly, I hope your son doesn't have to worry about it either if he chooses to have kids.
Well,
I hope he gets.
So
yeah. In Canada, we I don't know if every job is guaranteed it, to be honest, but the vast majority of jobs are guaranteed at least some mat leave, and a lot of them do offer paternity leave as well. It's not as long, but I have high hopes, and here's why. When things are quiet, when nobody's fighting, when these laws aren't put in place, that's when this kind of stuff thrives. We like, people are trying to roll back the dial on women's rights right now in the US because we're getting somewhere, and because more and more women are waking up and saying, I don't want this. This is not the life I want. I did not sign up for this. Yeah. When people get vocal, there is going to be backlash. And that's a great thing, because what it means is that change is coming.
You're right. Because a lot of people have said that the overturning of Roe v. Wade was actually a positive. Like, if you really look at it, because it caused a lot of people, it caused the red wave to not happen. Like, I don't want to say it was positive. Like, we obviously want Roe v. Wade to be in place, but because that happened, it actually is going to end up, a lot of people are predicting it's going to really backfire in a major way.
I believe that. And I truly believe that the fact that it was overturned is going to lead them to finally codify it. Because before it was overturned, there was no reason to codify it. Nobody was threatening it. Now there is. It's a clear and present danger. And I truly believe that politicians, and we can see it across the states, right? Like individual states who are, enacting things to sort of try and give that right back as much as they can, right? I truly believe that outrage from politicians, the outrage from the general public, the fact that now it's a conversation. Abortion wasn't a conversation before. It was not accessible to everyone before, and it wasn't. It was, but it wasn't.
Here's what I'll say, and this is just as someone who grew up in America, watching elections all the time. I never fully understood every election cycle. The big argument was abortion. And I was always like, why are we still talking about abortion? We have Roe v. Wade, like, stop making this your issue. And I never realized that a Supreme Court could just, I didn't know. Yeah. I didn't have that education. But it was, when you say it wasn't talked about, I disagree though. It was talked about all the time. For my entire life, it has been, are you pro-life or pro-choice? It was a huge 100% conversation all the time.
But the law was nobody talked about the fact that the law could be overturned. Nobody was talking about, there was always the pro-life, pro-choice, whatever debate, but it was less a political debate about, what are we going to do about these laws, and more of a moral debate between people, right? So individual people, whereas, politicians brought it up all the time. Nobody touched it for years and years and years. Right. Nobody touched it. It was in every platform, but nobody touched it. And nobody was ever going, like those people talking about it, I truly believe that they had no intention of doing it. They were just trying to, tell their followers, look, this is what I believe, you should vote for me, right?
Right. Then
it got overturned. And then people started talking about the fact that every politician since it was decided should have codified it. And everyone started learning about what that meant, about the fact that Supreme Court decisions are not codified. Technically, gay marriage, not necessarily safe, right?
I believe
it is now. Now it is, But that only happened because Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Right. Well, right, and that's what I mean. That's why I wanted, that's why I say, I think this was a positive, even though there are people who suffered as a result of it.
Absolutely, and you always see, any kind of civil change is always preceded by a surge in political sort of tyranny, right? Because they feel the people are okay, I'm going to use some Marxist terms here, but the bourgeoisie sees that the proletariat is unhappy. They feel the unrest, the restlessness. They see the unruliness, the protests, the violence, the crimes, whatever. They see all that. They hear the people in the street galvanizing, and they get scared. So what do? They take away as many rights as they can. And the bigger issue is that they come up with a way to make us fight each other. Well, we're fighting each other about Roe v. Wade. Guess who we're not fighting? The billionaires for whom this will never, ever be an issue.
Right.
Exactly. When we're fighting each other about gay marriage, guess who we're not fighting? The billionaires for whom this will never be an issue.
Right. Exactly.
So they know that the best way to stop a revolution, or they think the best way to stop a revolution, is to turn us on each other.
Right.
And that is the best way. What I'm happy to see is that more and more people, and I think we really owe this to the younger generation, like, maybe my generation, but especially the generation below me, who are being just insanely vocal, who are getting into politics young. Like, I think you guys have the youngest,
the voter turnout it's during the I don't have the numbers on me,
also
but
elected like so many people are the first Gen Xers ever, like they're the youngest people.
So our generation is, we have Gen X is the generation above me. How old are you? What generation?
I'm a millennial.
Okay, so I'm a millennial too. So I'm an elder millennial because I'm 37. I'm old. I'm 37. So I'm an elder millennial. So then I think below us is
it Z?
Gen Z? Is it Gen? Hold on. See, now I gotta look because I'm like, hold on. Let's just take a second.
But like, I read something about how many Gen Z.
Yeah, because there was a 25-year-old. Okay, so we have
multiple were elected.
Millennials are then Gen Z, and then Gen Alpha is below them. So Gen Z right now, they're born 1995 to 2012. So we're now ushering in the age of Gen Z being able to vote. And what's really unbelievable to me is, like, when I was in high school, I knew about, like the big presidential elections. I remember coming home and talking about Bill Clinton and Bob Dole and like whatever. But I knew nothing else. I didn't know anything about midterms, primaries, the Iowa caucus. Like what? Like it's so convoluted, American politics. But Gen Z, honestly thanks to like the rise of social media as well. It's such a double-edged sword, social media. Absolutely. It's like, it is terrible and ugly, and there's a lot of problems with it. However, because of it, young people know more now what is going on. So unfortunately, the baby boomers they're starting to die. Like, that's just what happens. They're starting to fall off. And those are the people that are 1946 to 1964, right? So all those
and they're also less likely to vote. Like the older generation, the older and more immobile you are, the less likely.
And Gen X is just kind of like, they're just angry for a lot of reasons, right? So Gen Z is now starting to vote. And when we look at 2 years from now, the kids who are currently 16 will be 18. And so when we look at the next major presidential election in America, it is like, I've never felt so motivated to keep talking politically over the next 2 years to try to get my social media to reach. I'm almost like mad that I don't teach high school anymore, because I would be like all over my high schoolers and be like, let's talk politics for 5 minutes a day, to get them so that when they're 18, they will vote. And it's not likely that a Gen Zer is going to vote for the current Republican Party. It's just not likely. And so I am optimistic for those odds. I just still think, like, when we talk about going back to women and what's expected of us, I still think that there are plenty of delusional leftist Democrats who still, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, I think that that's going to be still a hard uphill battle for women to overcome.
I agree. I would like to address one sort of bit of terminology. Leftist and Democrat, not the same thing.
That's very true.
Democrats are centrists.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Centrists, in my opinion, are worse than either side, because with a centrist, you don't know what they're going to do. You can never predict what they're going to do. All they are interested in is making the most, like, they're utilitarian. They are interested in making the most people happy. You don't know what they're going to do. They're going to do entirely what is popular. Yeah. They have no backbone, no values. They, like, at least the right can go fuck themselves. But listen, they at least they have the integrity to have, like, values and fight
this is for what whether their values are good or not.
Their values are shit. Their values are you know,
but at least they stick to their values, right?
But
and I hate to say that's like the Hamilton line. You know, when they ask Hamilton, "Are you familiar with Hamilton, the musical?"
I mean, I know of it, but I haven't.
Okay, so there's like this big scene is when, you know, I guess Hamilton has like the deciding factor for the electoral college or whatever, however it was working at the time, to decide between Aaron Burr and Thomas Jefferson. And so he's the deciding vote, basically. And they were like, who are you going to vote for? And Hamilton and Jefferson, like, literally fought all the time. They never agreed on anything. And Aaron Burr and him were friends, but Aaron Burr was always centrist, wishy-washy. He sat back and he waited. He didn't. And so Hamilton says, I'm going to put my support and my vote for Jefferson because Jefferson has beliefs and Aaron Burr has none. And that's like the big thing that like sends Aaron Burr into, like, you know, spiraling, and then he shoots Hamilton. So that's the thing is, like, not to like give Republicans any kind of credit, but at the very least, you have a belief and you stick to it, where you're right. Centrists are just kind of like, and that's what everybody was like.
And that's, exactly. And that's what politics needs. Like, politics does not need wishy-washy people who aren't sure, you know, who are essentially people pleasers. We don't need people pleasers in politics, because quite frankly, people are idiots. The average citizen is an idiot and does not know what the country needs, does not know what they need. The average citizen would vote against, like, the average citizen can be swayed by language. So what we need is someone who has strict values, will do the work to, you know, research and make sure that they are, you know, doing the best to upkeep those values, and will hold themselves accountable to those values. We need people who are not going to run the government like a business. We need people who are going to run it for the people. And the reality is that,
go ahead. Sorry, finish.
No, I was just going to say, the reality is that centrists are not in the business of making the government a better place. Centrists, or the world a better place. Even Republicans believe that that's what they're doing. And I'm not, again, not excusing their beliefs, but I'm saying that they, like, their motivation is to make the world better for them, at least.
Right. Yeah.
Centrists aren't doing anything. They're not making the world better for anyone. They don't have any values that they're holding tight. Their only goal is to get reelected. That's it.
Right. Exactly. So, well, I think a good example of this is Mitch McConnell. I mean, we saw him vote against codifying
Turtle Man.
Right, turtle we saw him vote against codifying the Marriage Equality Act, right? And everyone's like, "How does your wife feel? You're in an interracial marriage." He knew it was all a political game for him. He knew that his vote literally wasn't going to matter. He knew they were going to get the votes that they needed to codify it, to save his marriage. He didn't care. It had nothing to do with his wife, because he knew that his vote was going to be pointless, but he voted no to appease his base, his financial supporters. So it's all a political game. It doesn't matter if they're in an interracial marriage. They will vote against their very interests if it means keeping them in office. And it's the same idea too, that like, and this is why, I mean, a lot of people were like, oh, Joe Biden's not really a leftist. He's you know, a moderate. He's centrist. Yes, he is. But the reason that I liked him, and the reason that a lot of people get so mad about Joe Biden, speaking specifically like Christians and Catholics, is that he is Catholic. He is a devout Catholic, but he supports abortion. And the Catholics are just up in arms. Like, how can he? Because he knows that he is a political, an elected official of the people, not of the Catholic faith. He was not elected to the Catholic Church. He was elected to the United States of America, which is not a Catholic country. So he knows, I can't make a law based on my he might personally be against abortion, but he knows that he can't put that on the entire country. And it drives me insane.
The same was with Obama and gay marriage.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
He legalized it despite being devoutly Catholic.
Right. And that is that is the crux of the entire, when the right, when the MAGA, the Republicans get up in arms about their rights and all this stuff, they are actively fighting against what America is supposed to be for. And and in some ways, I think, when America started, they were like, oh, the great American experiment, right? Like we heard that all the time with our forefathers. I think it's failed. I think the experiment has failed. I think that when you give people all the freedoms, now they're like, oh, we can't be touched. We're allowed to do this because we're free. We're America. But then there's no rule.
Absolutely.
And they don't understand the First Amendment, that it's freedom of religion and from religion.
Yes.
You're supposed to be free from and of.
Yes. Not only that, but the biggest problem with America was not that it was a free country. It was that it was individually free.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom for the individual over the many. The rights of the individual over the many. And the gun debate is the perfect example of that. There's absolutely no reason people should be allowed to have access to assault rifles. There just isn't. You don't need it. You don't need it to hunt. You don't need it to.
Well, so let me tell you a real quick story about what happened to me today. I don't know if you saw my TikTok or my reel that I posted on Instagram. This morning, I took my daughter to daycare and I pulled up next to a busted down. I mean, it was like really busted up, like Toyota, whatever. And there was a man face down on the steering wheel, completely passed out, and what looked next to him to be a scope. Okay, attached to, I couldn't tell what it was attached to, but if it was attached to something, it was likely a gun. But it was covered with bags and I couldn't quite tell. So I took my daughter and I went in and I took her upstairs and I was like, hey, listen, I know you guys have all the security, so I'm going to drop her. I said, but there is a man. I told them what was going on outside. So they were like, okay, we're going to call the police. So I went and took my car and I sat on the other side to wait for the police because I was prepared in that moment that if that man woke up, like, I did take a moment. I was like, all right, realistically, this man is passed out at his wheel. It's not like he's here likely to shoot up a daycare. Okay. However, I can't be certain of that because I live in America and shootings happen for zero reason all the time. So, and somebody commented was like, you shouldn't have even taken your daughter in. You should have left. And I was like, yeah, maybe. However, there was also children upstairs too, that like other people that I needed to like warn and protect. So I sat there, they called the cops, I waited, and then the cops finally came and they took him out of the car. And that's when I noticed, the person in my comment section decided that I knew the moment I saw him, but that's when I noticed that this happened to be a person of color. Okay. I could not tell when he was face down that this man was a person of color, but all I saw was the scope, right? Like
in front of a daycare in America.
Exactly. So then my role, though, shifted.
Also, quite frankly, a man passed out in front of a daycare is suspicious enough.
Right. Well, and I should also preface, there is a like mini mart. So my kids' daycare is like a whole, like not a whole big plaza, but like it's a 4 establishment building. So there's like a music store, the daycare, a hair salon, and a mini mart.
Right.
And then the daycare is like the entire like top floor. So he could have easily like
right.
mini mart to get to, but like still. So once I realized he was a person of color and the cops were there, I was like, all right, the likelihood of him now trying to like get into the building and hurt my child is non-existent. But now I'm going to sit here as an advocate for him, in case these 4 white cops decide to not
do what they do.
Right.
Yeah.
So they ended up arresting him because my daycare, the woman who owns the daycare told me that he had a warrant out for like a traffic violation, though, for like something so stupid, right? So now I'm like all conflicted about it. Had he not had a gun in his car, right? Had he not had a scope in his car, I probably would have just been like, hey, there's a man passed out. Does somebody want to come down here and wake him up? But because there was a scope in the car, we had to call the cops, right?
Right.
And it's all because America insists that you have to have the right to have these guns in your possession in the car. And they didn't take the gun out or whatever. They didn't take the scope out. So like maybe he had a legal permit to carry it. I don't know. I don't care. But it was just, there was so many moving parts of my emotions in that scenario. And it all boils down to that man had a right to own that gun. And I don't care what kind of gun it was. Like, there's just living in America at this point is not something that anyone can just be like, it's amazing here. Is it? Is it?
It's a dumpster fire.
No,
I'm sorry.
you
literally, like, there was a point in time when I was young. So when I was really young, I wanted to be, like, actually not really young, like up until I was like 20. I wanted to be an actress. I was not only going to a specialized high school for it, but I was taking lots of classes and stuff outside of school and you know, all of that. There was a point in time where I wanted to move to America and you know, try and make a go of it. You could not pay me any amount of money to move to a country where I, as an educator, feel that fucking vulnerable.
Right.
Also, you couldn't pay me to move to a country where, as an educator of children, I have to spend multiple days teaching them how to try and survive a gun attack. That is not something that I have ever thought of in Canada. We have like lockdown drills like a couple times a year, but it's never been like the worst that when I was a kid, like in kindergarten, we had a lockdown at my school. It wasn't they just locked the school. We didn't have to like go under desks or anything, so we didn't even really know what was going on. Yeah. Because there was an armed robbery at a bank in the area, right? That is sort of the most that you'll ever have to deal with. And I know like multiple teachers who are well into their careers that have never had to deal with anything like that, right? Like, it's just not something that you have to really worry about. And on top of that, it's probably not going to be an assault weapon, especially because right now the Canadian government is banning over, like, I think there's about 3,000 of them that they're banning, you know, because but the difference is that it's not part of our culture. It's just not. Guns are not part of our culture, and individual over the many is not the way that Canada works. I'm not saying we're perfect. We have a lot of issues, but in that regard, I'm thankful. You know, our abortion laws are protected by our charter, right? Like our abortion laws. It's not a technical, like, it's not technically codified, but the law that, like, the Supreme Court ruled that preventing it goes against the charter. So like there's a part in the charter that specifically guarantees our right. You know, like I'm happy, I'm glad about that in Canada. That's not something I have to worry about. I don't have to, I wouldn't, like, I would probably be a recluse if I lived in America. I don't think I would, you know, I'm terrified of guns and stuff. And as someone who has already been the victim of violence, like at the hands of men, there's no fucking way. There's just no way.
I mean, one of my TikToks that's currently going viral is I literally duetted a girl who just said, you know, out of all the 606 mass shootings that have happened in 2022, not one of them was perpetuated by a woman. There's men in the comments. Here come the men of like, oh, so we need equal rights for women. I'm like, I say this. When I go into any public place, it is really sad that when I go to the movies, when I go shopping, when I go to see Christmas lights, when I go to see a show, a concert, there's a part of the back of my head that is on alert, that is thinking, I hope we don't die tonight. Like, and that is what it means to live in America. And it's like, I was thinking too,
freedom.
Freedom. After this morning, you know, and everything I went through, I was like, you know, because
I just need to say, like, I'm in awe that you're here. Like, I would have had to say, I would have been, you know, like,
honestly, once everything was fine, I came home and I like cried to my husband. I like cried it out and whatever. But like, I was able to move on because nothing did happen.
Right, like, but that's terrifying. I can't imagine being in that situation.
It was definitely scary, but like, also that's living here. Right. Living here is constantly being like, do you have a gun? Are you about to shoot people? I'm calling the cops. Like, and then also knowing that calling the cops could also open up an entirely different can of worms. Yeah. That like, that you're just not prepared to, because honestly, this woman on my TikTok, she's like accusing me of knowing his race. she's like, you knew that it was a scope, so you knew his race. And I'm like, I'm telling you right now, like, please do, like, I'm not the person, I'm not the one. Like, do not come at me accusing me of calling the cops on a black man, because that is not, like, we're not going there. But like, that is the reality, that if I call the cops in an effort to protect my family, I am potentially creating another situation where I could be ruining someone else's life. And how do I make those decisions? And so as I was like thinking about this morning and getting ready, I was like, you know, when I talk to some family members I have, they're like, oh, America's great because at least we're not in, you know, Iran or things. Yeah, at least we're not in Iran. But also, like, you can't compare what's going on over there to what's going on over here, because they are completely different fears. They're completely different scenarios. And sure, am I like at risk of getting, you know, murdered right now from the government? No, it's a completely different scenario, but both things can be true. Both countries can suck in different levels and different different levels of severity.
It's also a fallacy.
Like well, I'm not there.
Exactly. That's a fallacious argument.
Right, exactly.
That is a full-on fallacious argument. The fallacy of, I can't remember what it's called. I did a video on it on TikTok. No, I did a video on it on TikTok a while ago. I can't remember what it's called, but anyways, it's basically, it has a name. I'll think about it later, but
is it ad hominem?
No, it's something long and like words that you wouldn't usually use in any other.
Right.
But it's basically the idea that like you can negate anyone's argument with, well, someone else has it worse. Like, say anything, and I can be like, oh, well, at least you're not that. You know, like that's not an argument.
It's
that's
like,
not a counter argument.
It's like 2 women. It's like, well, oh, you got raped. Well, at least you didn't get pregnant from it. Like,
yeah,
no,
like
it's still bad. Like, it
yeah, the issue is still, exactly. And all it does is distract from, you know, the issue at hand, right? Like,
exactly.
Okay, so I should be happy that I'm allowed to show my hair and not complain about the fact that I don't have rights to my own body. Like,
exactly.
I should be grateful that I live in a country that doesn't let me do what I want with my body. Like that seems like an unreasonable ask, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just, it's really sad to, it's really frustrating to live in a country, just in a world where it's like, where do you go? Like, where do you go where it's going to be better? Like, honestly, because, and that's the other thing too, that people don't, they're like, well, if you don't like America, get out. Well, we can't, there is literally there's no reality for me as a middle-class teacher where I could say, you know what, I am going to move to Canada. I could never financially make that happen. The amount of money that you need in order to move. So
that's a huge thing.
We're stuck. And so we have to keep fighting.
People don't get that. Yes.
Right.
People don't get how much money it takes to relocate.
Exactly. And it's not like my student loan debt's not going to follow me. It'll still be there. And you know what? I read this recently and it made me absolutely insane. Did you know that credit scores were literally, like, my parents, when they were at their house, like, a credit score wasn't a thing. Like, they didn't have, like, credit scores like just came about like 30 years ago. Yeah. So when everyone's like, oh, well, your parents were able to buy, you know, we bought a house and blah, blah, blah. Well, your credit score was not a thing. Credit scores were like literally created to basically keep us down. Right.
Yeah.
So
it's also because credit scores were created because like generations after them have accrued the most debt. Like they didn't have debt the way that we did.
1989.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Prior to 1989, people did not have debt the way that we do.
Yep.
Inflation.
FICO worked with the national credit bureaus to create a credit scoring model that could be used to evaluate all consumers. This was in the first generalized credit score.
That's also a perfect way to keep people in their class, right? In their specific place. I read something recently that said that in Canada, and I imagine it's just as bad, if not worse, in the US, but in Canada, Canadians have $1.5 in debt for every $1 that they make. So you're literally like accruing more debt as you work.
If you want to have like a really depressing moment, do you have an account with mint.com? Like, do you guys do that up there? Is that something? Probably, maybe not for, I don't know if you guys have different currency. Okay. So Mint, in America, it's a website that tracks your credit score for free. You can also use it to budget.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
It will tell you what your net worth is. Man, if my net worth isn't negative six figures, like all of us, the only thing that makes me feel better is knowing that I'm not alone. That I'm not.
No, and you know what's wild is your net worth is worth negative six figures, and you're a middle class person.
Yeah,
it's not wild. Like you are middle class with a home.
Right. I own my home. I own 2 cars.
That's wild.
I have land, but my net worth, and it's because of my student loan debt. Like my husband and I are kind of at a point where we're like, maybe we should just stay in school and keep taking out federal loans until the whole thing just implodes. And then and once they're all forgiven, we'll just stop getting educated. We'll be like, all right, we're done. Like, we're done. But because when you're in school, you don't have to pay on them, right? So you don't have to pay on them, and they just keep accruing. And right now the interest rate is 0. So they're not getting bigger. So the theory, eventually it's just going to explode. Yeah, go ahead.
How much is your tuition?
Oh, my tuition?
Yeah, you're doing a master's, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So how much is your tuition a year?
Okay. I want to say
ballpark.
I'm trying to remember what I paid last semester. I think it was $4,000 something
per semester.
Yeah, because I'm, not living on campus.
Right.
I'm just taking the classes, whatever. So I think for the 9 credits, it was because, and here's the life hack that we've done that hopefully will not come back to totally screw us. But they will tell you when you apply for your federal student loans, they're like, oh, here's how much you can get. So you can get $20,000 per year for a master's degree. If you don't need all of that, you can either decline the remaining balance, or you can take it and then you can use it as a refund. So they'll send all that money to the university, and then the university will send you a check for $4,000, $6,000, whatever. Actually, I think no, it was $6,000 for this past semester for 9 credits. So every so often when that happens, if there's going to be a refund, we'll take it and we'll use it to pay off another debt, because the interest rate on a federal loan is going to be way lower than the car debt or the credit card. So we'll take that refund, and then we won't have to pay back on it for a while. But yeah, I think it was $6,000 for the 9 credit, $6,000, for the 9 credits. And then next semester I'm taking 9 credits. So it'll be another $6,000. But my total debt,
that's similar to what mine is, but
yeah.
What was your, my undergrad was about $3,000 to $4,000 a year.
Did you live on campus, including housing? No. Okay.
No. I lived off campus, but it was $3,000 to $4,000 a year, tuition.
So here in America, we have private colleges and then state colleges. And with millennials, especially with me, I went to a private college, a private out-of-state college. So if you go to a college in the state that you live in, and it is a state college, then it's cheaper because they're supplemented by the government.
Yeah.
Right.
But because you have private universities, the state ones tend to not be as good, right?
Correct.
Because why work at a state school when you can get paid private?
Right. So, but I wanted to go for musical theater. There was no deterring me. Nobody was going to tell me no. And my parents really believed that I was going to be this big Broadway star, and I just, whatever. So I went to a private out-of-state college. I don't remember the exact price tag at this point, but here's what I will tell you. My parents took out Parent Plus loans for 2 of the years, and I took out loans for the other 2 years. My parents did the same thing for my brothers. So my parents paid for a total of 4 years in loans, but they still had to do loans. It's not like they paid, they had to take out loans. So when I was done, And 6 months had passed because there's a 6 months grace period where they're like, here, you've got 6 months to get a job so you can pay back your loans. When that passed, I had to start paying $850 a month on the loan. The total balance, I'm not entirely certain of it, but my parents were then encouraged to consolidate the federal loans to a private bank because they were told if you defer, if you do a forbearance, whatever, that interest is still going to accrue and the balance is going to go up and you'll never get out from it. So you need to start paying right away. So they were encouraged by whomever to consolidate it to a private bank. So then my loans went from federal to a private bank and it lowered the rate, but then it became a 30-year loan. It lowered the rate, it lowered like the monthly payment, whatever. But all in all, it was like $75,000 for 2 years of school. Okay. So I paid, yeah.
What?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Like this is what I'm telling you. Like I didn't know. Right.
Is that because of the
housing, like all of it? Like, cause I lived on campus.
But did that have anything to do with like, is that anything to do with the interest, or is that simply just
possibly, yeah. But
that's what most people have to do to go to university.
And like,
wow.
And the thing is, most colleges insist that you live on campus the first year. Okay, so I just typed in my university right now for this year. How could anybody want to? The tuition for the 2020-2021 school year last year was $34,490 for 1 year of school.
Not including housing.
No, that would include housing.
Oh,
it's all, but still $34,000 1 year of college. So I was paying. Yeah, go ahead. I was paying on that. Okay, for 10 years. I paid on that. And then I had to go back to school to get my teaching degree. So my private bank let me put on a forbearance, whatever, but they still added interest to it. So I had maybe paid down $6,000 over the course of 10 years. Okay. Only $6,000 over the course of 10 years had I paid down the balance. But the amount of interest they tacked on in the 18 months that I was not paying on it brought me back up to $2,000 more than the original balance. So 11 years after I first started paying, I now owed $77,000. And so now I'm just now, after like 3 years, I'm just now down to like $70,000 that I still owe for a degree that I have paid over $60,000 on. Like it is, the entire system is so screwed and so corrupt because of interest fees. And here's another great story. My mother-in-law's girlfriend just got her loans forgiven because we do have a forgiveness repayment program with our government that if you work for 10 years and make 10 years of consistent payments on your federal loans and you're working in a nonprofit, low income, whatever, they'll forgive the rest of the loans, right? So she qualified for that and got them forgiven. But the problem was that she started with $90,000 in loans. And the amount that was forgiven after 10 years of regular on-time payments was $109,000. It was $19,000 more than the original total 10 years ago. So like the whole thing
because of the interest, right?
Because of the interest.
Jesus Christ.
The whole thing is screwed.
I just looked up a year. So York is where I did my undergrad, and that's so it's one of the top schools in the country. Like it's pretty, renowned. It's got a lot of cool programs. So full-time tuition would be about $7,000 plus textbooks, which would be about another $15,000. So we're looking at like, let's say $9,000 plus res, which is another $7,000 plus the meal plan, which is about, Jesus Christ, living on campus. Like I didn't realize how you are actually better off getting an apartment than living on campus. Yeah. Like residence and meal plan is more expensive than living on your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so I looked at the breakdown. So I went to a conservatory for musical theater. So it was, I don't know what it was then, but for this year, $16,895 per term. So that's 12 to 18.5 credit hours, $17,000 per term. Then you have the mandatory fees, the student service fee, the technology fee, the learning fee, whatever that is. Then you have the curriculum fees. There's a conservatory fee. Then there is a fee just to take your lessons, your private voice lessons. Then there is the recording system studio time. On top of that, there is a conference fee. If you go to the conference, there's a senior showcase fee. And this doesn't even include the housing in this, unless I'm flabbergasted at looking at these prices and thinking, like, when my kids want to go to college, how much more is this going to be?
Right. And that's the crazy thing, is that if you want to be sort of comfortable, if you want to be comfortable, if you want to have benefits, if you want to, be relatively taken care of, you need to have a degree of some sort. You just do, at least an undergrad. So, but you have to go into extreme debt to get that undergrad. So if you want to be relatively taken care of, you have to sign yourself up for a life of debt that you will owe the government or a bank, just so that you can work to make money to pay back those loans. So you're essentially taking out a loan so that you can work to pay back that loan.
Yep. And they told us when we were graduating, you take out the loans because you'll get a job and you'll be able to pay it back. And we're like, oh, okay.
In musical theater? Sorry.
Well, because in musical theater, here's the thing. So the program I went to, they were like, you might not make it big on Broadway, but we will train you to work in the industry in a variety of ways. So, like, I could have worked in the costume department or backstage, voiceover work, theater for youth. There is a really large industry, but the problem is that it is so competitive. And even so, the rate of pay has gone down so much. But it's almost the same idea with teaching. Yeah, take out loans to go be a teacher, but your starting pay is going to be $25,000 a year. $30,000, even $40,000. Like in Pennsylvania, the base starting pay generally is around $40,000 for a first year teacher, which is still not even enough. Yeah. So, like, for almost any degree, it's just like, you can't fathom that any person, because honestly, even if I went like School of Pharmacy, let me look at my college. If I went to School of Nursing, it's still $16,895. Now, I might make more as a nurse, but it's still the same amount of money. Like, you're still paying the same amount of ridiculous money and hoping that, and you're going into a field where you're going to work long hours. You're going to be completely undervalued. You might not have a union. Like, it honestly
sounds like being an adult in America is just signing up for a lifetime of
misery,
working to pay off debt.
Yes.
Debt that you didn't want, like debt that you got so that you could, like, that's still wild to me. It's like they created a problem and then charged you to find a solution for it
that you'll never find. And that is why, that's one of the reasons why I went to get my master's to become a school counselor, because if I ever actually become a school counselor, I want to counsel, I want to be a high school counselor, so I can say to my students, you don't need to go to college. Go find a job, go learn a trade. You don't have to go to college. If you want to go to college, great. Let's talk about all the resources. But we were all pigeonholed. Millennials were pigeonholed. You must go to college. If you don't go to college, if you go to community college or a trade school, you're scum.
No respect for the trades.
No respect.
Which is wild because if
you were a mechanic, everyone assumed you were an uneducated piece of crap. That is how we were just raised to think of people.
You fix a car.
Right. I can't fix a car.
I don't even know the pieces.
I don't care if my mechanic is the smartest person in the world. Can he fix my car? Great. He has all of my respect. Why were we raised this way?
I always
so
think,
frustrating.
I always think about that with the example of plumbing. When you go, so first of all, you have to, plumbing and carpentry, you have to go to school. You have to, there's a whole bunch of math and science involved. then you have to apprentice for like 5 years before you can get your like master or whatever and like do your own jobs and shit.
And everyone's like,
what
oh,
about that sounds uneducated to you? Like, what
Right.
about that sounds like that to me sounds like what am I doing? I'm in the classroom for 2 years. And during that, I spent a couple months in a kid's classroom, and then I'm thrown into the job. Like, how is that? How am I better than that? You know, like, and also,
that's what I mean. It's like it.
Oh, you have a degree in philosophy? Can you fix my toilet? No.
Nope. Well, that's what I mean. It's like it's different. It's different tiers of education, right? So like I'm getting educated right now in mental health, school counseling, how to counsel people, right? But I cannot, for the life of me, fix my plumbing, fix my car. I can barely sew to save my own damn life, okay? But the people who would do all those things for me, they're educated in those ways, but they're not educated to counsel people, or maybe like, it's just varying degrees of education. But I think that when we look at education, I think that there's got to be a way, and I don't know what the answer is, but a way that we can educate people on how to be empathetic and to be educated on more things. Because like, if you tell me, okay, not all master's degrees are created equal. And I was having this conversation with my mother the other day. Do you know the account Fallible Spoonie, Michelle Carpenter? Do you know her? Okay. She's one of my closest friends now. She doesn't have the same degrees as me, not even close. She is 1000% smarter than me. She knows way more because of what she has chosen to consume, what she has chosen to read. She has chosen to educate herself. And I have her edit my goddamn papers because she is so smart. But she was in a position where she was not able to get the education that maybe she wanted, but she has a good job. She's working and she's doing well for herself, but she doesn't have the same degrees as me or as many as me, but she is hella smarter than me. And you can't tell me that a master's degree in business is going to be the same as a master's degree in education or mental health, because you're learning different things. So it's a matter of, when we say you're not educated, it's not a matter of saying like, you don't have the degree, you don't have paper. When I say someone's not educated, I don't mean collegiately. I mean, you're not consuming the world.
You don't have the knowledge.
Right. Yeah. You're not just reading. You're just not consuming what is happening in the world and understanding what's around you. And that to me is the difference between being educated or uneducated. It's not whether you're a plumber or a teacher.
No, exactly. And in my opinion, being educated can also be something that you do yourself. Like,
exactly.
I was in gender and women's studies for university. I graduated in 2018. I still read just as much about it as I did when I was in my undergrad. Yeah. And that's because it's something I care about. So I have remained educated on the subject. Right. If I didn't read anything about it, I would not still be educated on the subject. But I have chosen to educate myself on this subject. You know, like that's what it is. If you've done the work to educate yourself, then you are educated. Maybe not collegiately, but you are educated, right?
Right. And we live in an era where there's like no excuse for you to like, I just don't know anything about these things. Well, then go read about it. Go find out about it.
And listen, I'm not going to sit back and pretend that going to university is useless, and that if you go to university for something, you will probably have a better understanding of it than someone who has not had access to that and who has simply read up on it. And that's because, education is not just about reading. It's about talking. It's about exploring. It's about, et cetera. However, if you are someone who does not have access to formal education, finding that information yourself and then finding people to have those I'm not saying it's easy. Finding people to have those conversations with and to help you expand your mind with is difficult, especially if you don't run in a circle of educated people.
Exactly.
But you can find those people, and you can, find people who sort of talk about your, the knowledge, the base knowledge that you have, and who help you expand your thinking around it. Right. That's part of the beauty about social media. It's free, I mean,
it's free. Well,
as
long as you pay for the internet connection.
The vast majority of people, have access to the internet in some way or another, and people really educated people are on there helping people think through things and offering resources. And there are resources. You know, there is an excuse to not be formally educated. There is not an excuse to be completely ignorant.
Right. Exactly. That's a great way to say that.
And I also think that it's also a matter of valuing all skills. Like, there are very few skills that are useless. There are skills that are useless in certain situations. Like, you know, I always get, whenever I talk about my humanities degrees, I always get like engineers and stuff being like, oh, like, you know, people in the humanities think they actually do something, like, haha, I'm an engineer. And I'm like, oh, really? How'd you learn to be an engineer?
Right.
Who taught you?
Exactly. Yeah.
Who taught you? How do you think you'd know that? Like, it's just, it's engine. And I couldn't fucking design a, whatever the hell engineers design. Like, I don't know anything about, like, literally don't know anything about that. I would be useless. Can this engineer teach an intellectually delayed child to read? Because I can.
Right. Exactly.
You know, like,
exactly.
It's
understanding that we all have talents and skills and abilities, and we may not know everything there is to know, but it's honestly, it boils down to
it's a matter of valuing everyone's skills and understanding that no matter how like formal you think the skill is, we need it for the society to function. You know, we look down on garbage collectors. We know what happens when they're not doing their jobs. Like, they are necessary parts of society. 100%. Do you have to go to university to be a garbage collector? No. Is it equally valuable in terms of the role they play in society? Yes. In fact, it's far more valuable than a lot of roles that people who do go to university play. So it's like, where we get our value or where we decide value is placed is so weird, because it's definitely not from a like rational point of view.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think we covered like 1,000 great topics today, and I am starting to feel like it is lunchtime. I need to eat.
Me
so
too.
I'm going to wrap this up. But Anais, thank you so much.
This was so fun. I love this.
We should just chat normally.
Yeah, all the
time, because I love talking to you.
Me too.
But thank you so much for coming on. I was just like, as you were talking, I was like, what the hell am I going to title this video? Because we talked about so many things, so many different topics, but I will come up with something good. But I hope you'll come back. And
yes, please. I'd love to.
All right. Thank you. And I will see all of you hopefully next time. We'll make another video soon. All right. Bye.
Okay.